roadmap will be solvency, advantage 1, and the China Rise DA. Is there anybody not ready? We're winning this debate because the plan can't solve. Their advantage of economy is actually going to lead to a huge disadvantage, and the second disadvantage is the rise of China will cause an end to the world as we know it. Let's get into the specifics of that. Let's start with solvency. First, at the end of the debate, the affirmative has a massive fundamental problem. They can't guarantee to you that China will actually say yes to this plan. The 1AC reads you evidence establishing a history of distrust towards America. The affirmative provided no evidence that their plan can overcome this distrust. In fact, we asked the affirmative to prove that the ag specifically, and not the whole BIT, is what China wants. They never provided this evidence, and therefore you can't vote for it. Without this evidence, you know that a plan has huge solvency deficit to it. But second, the most damaging argument here is the Lieberthal in 2012 evidence that tells you that the ag would be a huge issue of distrust for China. This is a warranted response because if you believe the affirmative is true, then China would be tied to the U.S. in order to feed all their people. China would never say yes to being manipulated in such a way. We could change our agricultural all we want, and they would never believe, they would never go with that. Even if you believe there's a food shortage and people need to be fed, China doesn't need to use the United States in order to achieve this plan. They would exhaust all other plans before turning to the United States. It's the affirmative's burden to prove that China would specifically and only say yes to the U.S. when it comes to ag. All the logical evidence points to that they would not. And finally, solvency works like a linchpin. If you doubt that the plan will work, then you also have to doubt that their advantages will be gained from it. Meaning, without 100% solvency, you can't vote for the affirmative plan. And here's the deal. If you give them solvency, then you know you're going to have two issues, and that's the other side of this. This is a darned if you do and darned if you don't deal. It's a catch-22. If they say that they're winning solvency today, then you have to look at the advantage 1 and the China Rise disadvantages as the two biggest disadvantages that outweigh. Let's start with the economy advantage 1. Two responses here. They're missing the internal link card to the economy saves. They try to claim that by voting for them, you save everyone's economy. But without this internal link card that says the agricultural industry it's alone is the key to saving the Chinese economy, then you don't get much of an impact out of this advantage. Even if they win it, you're not going to get much. The magnitude is very small, and the probability of gaining anything is very difficult. But second, the first disadvantage against this case and the most probable scenario is a net loss of economy for America. As soon as the U.S. opens its doors to trading ag with China, it's when we open up that door to China hijacking our intellectual rights. They stop buying from us, and as soon as they have this technology and they manufacture it themselves. The only answer by the affirmative is that the BIT prevents China from stealing this. But really? How? Where is that evidence that actually shows that that's what's going to take place with the BIT preventing the theft of agricultural intellectual rights? It's not there. The Lucas and 23 evidence indicates that in the 2NC that China is doing their best to steal intellectual rights currently in the status quo, even though that is an illegal practice. So why would they stop breaking the law? I mean, even if you pass a plan today and they say it's illegal, they're doing it now and it's illegal, they're not going to stop doing that. It's only going to be worse. All the affirmative does is literally open the door to China for them to be able to get a hold of our technology and use it against us. This is a huge disadvantage against the plan. If they win the solvency, then they lose on economy, and that outweighs. But next, let's move on to the China Rise disadvantage. I have 5 responses. Number 1, the 1AR drops the ball here. The only response is to concede all aspects of the disadvantage with the exception of trying to turn it. There's just too much argumentation from the negative on this disadvantage, which overwhelms anything the affirmative can try to wiggle out of in their last speech. This DA makes it impossible for you to vote affirmative. Second, the Farley 2015 evidence my partner read clearly warrants the idea of the more economic engagement we do with China, the more they grow their economy. And the more they grow their economy, the more they can support their military. There was no answer to this by the affirmative. This is a dollar-for-dollar issue and is empirically proven. This evidence establishes a clear 100% probability of a China rise militarily in their power because of a rise in their economy. Both sides agree to this probability. Third, the Gilton and 2010 evidence from my partner's first speech is an internal link that indicates a true risk you see in changing China's economy. If China's military is allowed to expand, then they will do more to project their power within Asia. More submarines in the South China Sea, more missiles near Taiwan, and more military presence and with what are allies and what we call hotspots. The more military they have, the more potential for real danger. This evidence establishes a very fast time frame for the disadvantage impacts. The more military allowed, the faster we see a miscalculation by the Chinese military. fourth, the affirmative really mishandles the turn. They try to tell you that the more economy China has, the less likely they are to attack because they would be too economically tied to other countries. However, they mishandle this argument is because we aren't saying that China will become more powerful and start attacking the weak. What we're saying is that China becomes so big and so fast that there is a bigger risk of an accident. On this argument is where you can cast your vote. The magnitude of an accidental war far outweighs any impacts you get from the affirmative's advantages. You aren't getting any economic magnitude from the affirmative, and the affirmative's second advantage has no magnitude either, because you know China will work with other countries to feed its people. And fifth, at the end of the round, you're voting negative to prevent a future war created by a China rise, prevent China theft of intellectual ag property, which saves the U.S. economy and ultimately prevents the passage of a plan we know just won't work. And with that, I thank you, and I urge a negative ballot.